the economy, job one is a big issue today as the jobs and unemployment come out. 263 jobs added, unemployment at 3.7%. As you heard, the economy is still cooking with steam, and that means inflation are still a concern, and inflation outpacing wages. October wage increase 4.9%, October inflation 7.7%. Let's bring in our panel. Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist, syndicated radio host Hugh Hewitt, and Kimberly Strassel, member of the editorial board at the Wall Street Journal. Kimberly, when you see these numbers on the economy and how the administration is talking about them and reaction to them, how do you see it?
Yeah, it's a really confusing picture right now because if you think about it, consumer and business sentiment's in the tank. The stock market's not great. You've got certain sectors that have been doing really big layoffs. Interest rates are going up, mortgage rates are going up, and yet you have these, decent jobs numbers come out, and you have consumers who are continuing to spend. And I guess in the end, the bottom line is what we're seeing here is what you just summed up, which is that the economy is still cooking and cooking too much. You're seeing wage prices go up, wages going up. You're seeing consumer prices still going up, and inflation. That means the Fed is going to have to continue to get on it, and that elevates the risk yet again of us moving back toward recession.
Hugh?
I think Kimberly is exactly right, Brett. The clip you played of Chairman Powell saying 2 days ago, we really have too much job growth. He did not like this report today. It means that they do have to do what Kim just said, raise interest rates probably a half point in December and probably back to 3/4 points because inflation is the killer of recovery. They've got to have a recession before we can get back to a normal economy. The CBO's report in November, late November, said we could have as much of a recession as a 2% contraction. I think today's numbers are best of times, worst of times, but mostly for the Fed, the worst of times.
All right, Leslie, I want to turn topics to this shakeup in the Democratic calendar potentially, with President Biden proposing that South Carolina be the first primary state in the presidential election season, saying we must ensure that voters of color have a voice in choosing our nominee much earlier in the process and throughout the entire early window. Our party should no longer allow caucuses as part of our nominating process. We're a party dedicated to ensuring participation by all voters and for removing barriers to political participation. Here's a DNC rules meeting reaction to this. That's a big change, Leslie. If South Carolina goes first, if Georgia and Michigan move up to the top 5, what about that?
Well, I've heard in my party for many years the question of why are we keeping this antiquated system? And if we're the party of progressives, why aren't we progressing and why aren't we changing? And this may be a lot too much, too fast, but I don't think it's wrong to put it out there. Look, I do have a concern about some rural voters when it comes to caucusing, but I do think, and I agree with the president when he talks about the composite, the demographics of not only the Democratic Party, but the composite and the demographics of voters. I mean, you have a larger and larger minority voter base, specifically Latinos and African Americans, and that's not just within the Democratic Party. You're seeing that in independent voters. You're seeing that with Republican voters. So why shouldn't we have states go first that better represent not just the Democratic Party, but the voter base of the United States that actually reflect the demographics of this nation?
Hugh, here's Axios's analysis. Biden's proposed shakeup is likely to be adopted. Bigger states will move up, making for a nominating process that may be less picturesque, but will be more representative. This also looks like a good calendar for Vice President Harris if Biden doesn't run in 2024 or if she runs in 28. She'll be well positioned in South Carolina and Michigan and probably Georgia, too.
Well, I think that's true, Brett, but I think more importantly, it tells me Joe Biden plans to run for re-election. It's the Joe Biden renomination insurance policy. New Hampshire has often been, from Lyndon Johnson forward, a death knell for incumbents or precarious campaigns and an upset special. But as was noted earlier in the program, New Hampshire state law requires them to move their primary up as far as they have. They'll hold it in September of 23 if they have to be first in the nation. But I looked at this as being a clear signal Joe Biden is going to begin his campaign for re-election in South Carolina, which got him off the map in 2020.
Yeah, Kimberly, I was there in New Hampshire. I saw now President Biden finish 5th and some crowds that were really dismal, but he was obviously resuscitated in South Carolina with the help of James Clyburn and others. Now that would go first. What about Hugh's point there?
Yeah, I mean, Hugh makes a great point that this seems to be entirely a reflection of Joe Biden's experiences when he ran and finally won for the presidency. I mean, my concern, there's no issue necessarily with changing up a calendar. It's just that the party needs to do it for the right reasons. And I'm not sure doing this because it worked for Joe Biden is the right reason. You know, it's evident from the statements that were made that they're very concerned about minority voters and that this has an element of racial identity politics involved in it. But the bigger narrative that's been going on in the Democratic Party for some time now has been the problem it's had with blue collar and rural working voters. I'm not quite sure how this change would in any way address some of that, and in fact, it could actually make it worse.
In consultation with my French and my NATO friends, I'll be happy to sit down with Putin to see what he has in mind. He hasn't done that yet.
At the same time, it's very important. The president has been and remains open for contact, for negotiations. Of course, the preferred way to achieve our goals is through peaceful diplomatic means.
The president has said he has no plans to speak with Mr. Putin since Mr. Putin has shown no signs that he's willing to end the brutal war.
Well, will he or will he not sit down with Vladimir Putin? The president said he's open to it. Meantime, there are more and more stories about Vladimir Putin's health and that may be declining. We don't know the accuracy of those stories as of yet. We're back with our panel. Hugh, do you think the president is going to sit down?
No, I can't think of a single world leader in the West that Vladimir Putin cares less about than Joe Biden after the collapse in Afghanistan. I do think he cares a lot about what Great Britain does, what France does, what our NATO allies do, but not Joe Biden. He's not going to meet with him because Vladimir Putin simply is not impressed with Joe Biden.
Leslie.
I think Vladimir Putin is impressed with Joe Biden's country's money, and I think also with President Biden's ability and the military equipment that we provide that have been demolishing and taking over and even taking in Ukraine many of his own troops. So I would disagree. The president has made it clear he won't sit down alone. He would sit down with our allies. I think that's the best way to do this. And I think he's giving Putin an out here. He's basically saying, look, you know, I'll meet with you. We'll all meet with you. But you're going to have to pack up your toys and go home now. Enough is enough. I'm not sure Putin will do that, obviously.
Putin, the actions in Ukraine obviously will be a focus here at the Reagan National Defense Forum, Kimberly, but as will China, and maybe more so. Here is the back and forth on TikTok and the concern about this. It seems more and more that this is becoming a real national security threat, or at least it's being talked about it more. Kimberly.
Well, it is a real national security threat, and the problem is that we are not treating it such necessarily. I mean, if you want to have a policy on how you're going to handle some of these cybersecurity threats and other entities like TikTok, you have to have a bigger China policy in general. What is it? I mean, in terms of the Biden administration and China, and that's at the biggest level. How do we actually view China? Is it an adversary? Is it a strategic threat? Is it an economic competitor? Not to mention lack of policy in any of these individual areas, whether it be tech or how we counter their Navy, or whether we have a free trade to rival them in the region economically. There's just really no there.
And we're following the Elon Musk thing. From everything we can see so far, Twitter on the inside is leaking or giving these documents to Matt Taibbi, and they are going to put them out one by one, lay it out, and then do a Q&A. Right now, we're to the point where 2020 specific requests for somebody to delete specific tweets, and from the Biden team requesting this, and they reply handled. It seems like one by one they're going to leak these documents. Hugh, what do you think of this?
Well, I'm watching this so closely to see if there's collusion between big tech and big media to protect big Biden. And those documents will tell us if anyone reached out to Twitter to amplify the suppression of the New York Post story. So I'll be watching it all night, as I'm sure you will, and the rest of our panel.
Yeah. Leslie, last word on this?
I don't believe it. I think if these documents are authentic, and I'm not sure, do we know that they are? If they were going to be leaked, it would have been done before this. And I think look at the timing of this. You know, Elon Musk, everybody's trashing him and everybody's leaving Twitter. Now everybody's flocking to Twitter to see what he and this guy and these documents are going to say. So I'm not buying it.
Kimberly?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to be looking a little bit of a corollary to Hugh. I want to see if there's collusion, again, between the administration and Twitter, telling big tech what to do and how to handle stories. That's more concerning to me because we're worried that they're acting as arms of government.
All right. We wanted to stay on the breaking news. It just didn't break for us, but we'll see throughout the night where it goes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.